There's a quiet moment most people recognize but rarely talk about. It happens early in the morning when the alarm rings and your body feels heavy, your mind foggy, and the warm comfort of staying in bed feels far more appealing than chasing any ambitious goal. In that moment, motivation is nowhere to be found. No surge of inspiration, no emotional excitement, no powerful reason pushing you forward. And yet, some people still get up. They move, act, and follow through, not because they feel driven, but because they've learned something far more reliable than motivation. They've learned discipline. Most people grow up believing that motivation comes first and action follows. It feels logical. When you're excited, you work hard. When you feel inspired, you create. When you're energized, you train. But real life rarely follows this neat pattern. Feelings fluctuate constantly. Energy rises and falls. Focus drifts. Stress appears without warning. If action depended entirely on emotional readiness, very little meaningful work would ever get done. Discipline begins when a person understands that feelings are unreliable guides and that consistent action must be built on something more stable. At its core, discipline is not about willpower or toughness. It is about reducing the role emotions play in decision-making. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" a disciplined mind asks, "Is this what I decided matters?" That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. It moves a person away from mood-driven behavior and toward value-driven behavior. When actions are tied to deeply chosen priorities rather than temporary emotional states, consistency becomes possible even on difficult days. This is why highly disciplined people rarely rely on bursts of enthusiasm. They don't wait to feel ready. They create structures that make action almost automatic. Their environments are designed to reduce friction. Their routines remove the need for constant decisions. Their days follow predictable rhythms that conserve mental energy. Instead of debating whether to work out, they simply follow a schedule. Instead of wondering when to start important tasks, they begin at predetermined times. By turning choices into habits, they bypass the emotional negotiations that drain most people. Another powerful shift happens when a person stops seeing discipline as punishment. Many associate it with restriction, rigidity, and harsh self-control. But true discipline is closer to self-respect than self-denial. It is the quiet decision to act in alignment with long-term well-being rather than short-term comfort. It means protecting your future self from the consequences of today's impulses. This perspective transforms discipline from a burden into a form of personal care. Waking up early is no longer about suffering, it becomes an investment in clarity and time. Exercising is not a chore, it becomes a commitment to strength and vitality. Focused work is not deprivation, it is the path to freedom and competence. One of the biggest misconceptions about discipline is that it requires constant mental strength. In reality, the most disciplined individuals make fewer hard decisions than everyone else. They conserve willpower by planning ahead. When meals are prepared in advance, there is no nightly debate about eating healthy. When distractions are removed from the workspace, concentration requires less effort. When clear boundaries exist around time, fewer temptations arise. Discipline thrives in preparation, not in last-minute resistance. Identity also plays a crucial role. Behavior tends to follow the story a person believes about themselves. Someone who sees themselves as inconsistent will subconsciously repeat patterns that confirm that belief. Someone who identifies as dependable begins to act in ways that reinforce reliability. Discipline strengthens when actions are no longer viewed as isolated tasks but as expressions of identity. Instead of trying to run, a person becomes someone who does not skip training. Instead of trying to read more, they become someone who learns daily. This subtle identity shift reduces internal friction because behavior starts to feel natural rather than forced. Discipline without motivation also depends on accepting discomfort as normal. Modern life conditions people to seek convenience and avoid strain. With endless entertainment, instant delivery, and constant stimulation, even small efforts can feel overwhelming. But growth always involves some level of discomfort. Mental resistance does not signal danger, it signals unfamiliar effort. When discomfort is expected rather than feared, it loses its power to control decisions. A disciplined person does not interpret difficulty as a stop sign but as evidence of meaningful work. Begins to build momentum. An athlete who trains sluggishly still strengthens consistency. A student who studies with low energy still reinforces focus. Progress fuels motivation more reliably than waiting for inspiration. Small completed actions create a sense of movement, and movement generates emotional energy. This reverses the traditional belief that feelings must come first. The relationship between discipline and time is also deeply misunderstood. Many assume discipline means forcing oneself to work endlessly without rest. In reality, sustainable discipline requires balance. Recovery is not laziness, it is maintenance. Breaks protect mental clarity. Sleep restores decision-making ability. Leisure prevents burnout. Discipline is not extreme intensity, it is steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat, it functions through cycles of effort and renewal. Without rest, consistency collapses. Self-forgiveness is another quiet pillar of long-term discipline. People often abandon routines after small failures because they interpret mistakes as proof of inadequacy. But perfection is fragile. One missed workout or unproductive day can spiral into weeks of avoidance when guilt takes over. A disciplined mindset treats setbacks as temporary deviations, not identity verdicts. The focus remains on returning quickly rather than punishing oneself. This flexibility allows consistency to survive real-life disruptions. Environment quietly shapes behavior more than motivation ever could. People who struggle with discipline often blame themselves without realizing how strongly surroundings influence choices. Cluttered spaces increase distraction. Noisy environments weaken focus. Easy access to temptations erodes restraint. Changing environments often produces faster results than trying to strengthen willpower. A clean workspace invites concentration. Visible reminders reinforce priorities. Physical order supports mental order. Discipline grows naturally in spaces designed for intentional living. The social dimension also matters. Humans mirror the expectations and behaviors of those around them. When surrounded by people who value consistency, focus, and growth, discipline feels normal. In environments where procrastination and distraction dominate, maintaining standards becomes exhausting. Community either reinforces discipline or quietly undermines it. This influence often operates below awareness but shapes habits powerfully. Perhaps the most profound shift occurs when discipline becomes linked to personal meaning rather than external pressure. Goals imposed by others rarely inspire consistency, but commitments connected to personal values generate quiet determination. A person who exercises solely for appearance may quit easily, while someone training for long-term health or family responsibility persists through low motivation days. Meaning fuels perseverance in a way surface-level rewards cannot. Over time, discipline transforms from effort into lifestyle. Actions once requiring conscious control become automatic patterns. The mind resists less because behaviors align with identity and routine. Emotional turbulence still occurs, but it no longer dictates action. Discipline becomes a quiet background force guiding daily life. And once someone experiences the stability that discipline creates, a deeper question begins to emerge: not how to act when motivation disappears, but how to design a life where consistency feels natural rather than forced. That shift opens the door to understanding the systems, mental frameworks, and subtle behavioral strategies that make discipline almost effortless, which is where the deeper transformation truly begins. There is another quiet truth about discipline that most people only realize after years of frustration. Relying on self-control alone is exhausting. Each time you force yourself to act against your mood, you drain mental energy. When this happens occasionally, it feels manageable. But when every productive action depends on inner struggle, consistency begins to collapse. The mind starts associating important tasks with stress and resistance, and procrastination slowly becomes a form of emotional protection. This is why people who depend purely on willpower often perform in short bursts and then burn out. Sustainable discipline is not built on constant inner battles, it is built on designing life in a way that reduces those battles altogether. One of the most effective shifts a person can make is moving from goal-focused thinking to system-focused living. Goals create direction, but systems create progress. A goal is a destination in the future, while a system is a structure you follow today. When someone becomes obsessed with outcomes, motivation rises and falls depending on visible results. If progress inspired, they feel. An investor who reviews decisions through a structured process relies on a system rather than emotional impulses. Systems remove the drama from performance and replace it with rhythm. This rhythm is powerful because the brain adapts to patterns. Repeated behaviors gradually require less mental effort. What once felt difficult begins to feel familiar, and familiarity reduces resistance. The first few days of any disciplined routine feel heavy because the brain prefers known comforts, but repetition rewires this preference. Over time, not following the routine begins to feel more uncomfortable than following it. Discipline then shifts from something you push yourself to do into something that feels normal. The struggle decreases not because tasks become easier, but because the mind stops arguing with them. Another important element is learning to separate emotions from commands. Feelings provide information, but they should not dictate action. A person may feel tired, distracted, or restless, yet still be capable of completing meaningful work. Emotions often exaggerate discomfort, creating the illusion that action is unbearable. But when someone learns to observe feelings without obeying them, a gap appears between sensation and response. In that gap lies choice. Discipline grows stronger each time a person chooses action based on intention rather than mood. This does not mean ignoring mental health or genuine exhaustion, it means recognizing that temporary emotional states are often poor decision makers. Modern environments constantly attack discipline by overstimulating attention. Notifications, short videos, endless scrolling, and rapid entertainment condition the brain to seek instant rewards. Deep work, exercise, learning, and skill building feel slow in comparison. This creates a hidden imbalance where meaningful progress feels uncomfortable while distractions feel natural. Regaining discipline requires reversing this conditioning. Reducing unnecessary stimulation allows the brain to rediscover focus. Silence becomes less threatening. Boredom becomes tolerable. And in those quiet spaces, sustained attention becomes possible again. Discipline often returns not through adding more effort, but through removing excess noise. The way a person speaks to themselves also shapes their ability to remain consistent. Harsh self-criticism may seem motivating in the short term, but it quietly damages long-term discipline. When mistakes are met with internal insults, the mind begins associating effort with emotional punishment. This creates avoidance. On the other hand, calm and constructive self-talk encourages recovery. A disciplined mindset does not deny errors but treats them as data for adjustment. Instead of saying, "I failed again," it shifts toward, "That approach didn't work, I'll adjust." This subtle difference preserves self-respect while still allowing accountability. Energy management is another overlooked foundation. Discipline becomes fragile when physical and mental energy are neglected. Poor sleep weakens focus. Irregular eating disrupts mood stability. Lack of movement reduces cognitive sharpness. When the body is depleted, even small tasks feel overwhelming, making procrastination more likely. Many people blame their lack of discipline without realizing their energy systems are compromised. Consistency becomes far easier when biological needs are respected. Proper rest, nutrition, and movement are not luxuries, they are the infrastructure that supports reliable action. It is also important to understand the role of delayed gratification. Discipline often requires choosing long-term benefits over immediate pleasure. This skill strengthens with practice. Each time a person resists a short-term temptation, the brain reinforces neural pathways linked to patience and foresight. Over time, long-term thinking becomes more natural. Decisions begin to align with future well-being rather than present comfort. This shift does not eliminate desire for pleasure but brings balance. Immediate enjoyment no longer overrides meaningful priorities. Another quiet strength of disciplined individuals is their acceptance of monotony. Many valuable activities are repetitive and uneventful. Practice sessions, financial planning, studying fundamentals, refining skills, none of these feel thrilling every day. People who depend on excitement struggle to persist through these dull phases. But those who accept monotony as part of mastery develop unusual endurance. They understand that progress often hides inside repetition. What feels boring in the moment builds competence beneath the surface. This patience separates casual interest from professional commitment. Discipline also becomes easier when a person limits concentrating on a few meaningful priorities channels energy more effectively. Essential habits receive proper attention, and progress becomes visible. Simplicity strengthens discipline because it reduces cognitive clutter. There is also quiet power in starting small. Many people sabotage consistency by setting standards that are too intense to sustain. Extreme routines create early enthusiasm but rapid exhaustion. Smaller, manageable actions feel less intimidating and are easier to repeat daily. These modest behaviors may seem insignificant, but their compound effect becomes powerful over time. Small consistency outperforms occasional intensity. Discipline grows stronger when success feels achievable rather than overwhelming. Over time, these subtle shifts reshape how effort feels. Work becomes less about forcing and more about following structure. Temptations lose some of their control. Emotional fluctuations stop dominating choices. Life begins to operate through intentional patterns rather than reactive decisions. A person no longer waits for the perfect mood or ideal moment. Action becomes a standard response, not a negotiated option. And as this stability deepens, a new layer of understanding begins to form. Discipline is not just about productivity or achievement. It quietly reshapes self-trust. Each kept promise strengthens inner credibility. Each completed task reinforces reliability. A person begins to believe in their own consistency. That belief changes how challenges are approached, how goals are set, and how setbacks are handled. From this foundation, discipline evolves beyond habit into something more personal, more internal, and far more powerful than simple routine, a transformation that reveals how deeply discipline influences identity, confidence, and long-term direction. Most people don't notice the moment when a lack of discipline quietly turns into a lack of self-trust. It happens gradually, almost invisibly. A promise to wake up early gets postponed. A plan to exercise shifts to tomorrow. Important work is delayed for distractions that feel harmless in the moment. None of these decisions seem serious on their own, but over time they send a subtle message inward: your words cannot be fully trusted. When this pattern repeats, confidence begins to weaken, not because of failure itself, but because of inconsistency. Discipline, at its deepest level, is the practice of keeping small promises to yourself so that your mind learns to rely on you. Self-trust changes how a person moves through life. When you believe you will follow through, hesitation decreases. Decisions carry more weight. Goals feel realistic rather than wishful. But when self-trust is weak, even simple commitments feel heavy because part of you expects disappointment. This creates internal friction where planning feels pointless and ambition feels artificial. Discipline repairs this relationship quietly. Every time you act despite resistance, you strengthen an internal agreement that your intentions matter. Over months and years, this builds a stable sense of reliability that supports every area of life. There is also a strong connection between discipline and emotional stability. People often assume discipline is purely behavioral, but it deeply influences mental states. When actions are inconsistent, stress increases because unfinished tasks linger in the background of the mind. Avoided responsibilities quietly drain attention even during moments of rest. This creates a constant sense of mental clutter. Discipline reduces this noise by creating closure. Tasks are handled when they are meant to be handled. Priorities receive dedicated time. The mind relaxes because it no longer needs to repeatedly remind itself of neglected duties. Order outside creates calm inside. Another overlooked aspect is how discipline reshapes the experience of freedom. At first glance, structure appears restrictive. Schedules seem limiting. Routines feel repetitive. But without structure, time slips away unnoticed. Days get consumed by reactive behavior, leaving little room for meaningful progress. This creates a different kind of restriction, the restriction of stagnation. Discipline trades momentary flexibility for long-term control. By deciding in advance how time and energy are used, a person gains greater influence over outcomes. Freedom is no longer the ability to do anything impulsively. It becomes the ability to direct life intentionally. Discipline also reduces the emotional intensity of challenges. When difficult tasks are approached irregularly, they feel larger each time they are faced. Avoidance amplifies perceived difficulty, but consistent exposure builds familiarity. A person who regularly handles uncomfortable responsibilities becomes less. Discipline does not remove difficulty, it reduces the fear associated with difficulty. There is a subtle shift that occurs when someone stops negotiating with distractions. Many people try to balance productivity and temptation through constant internal bargaining. They promise short bursts of focus followed by rewards, but these negotiations often expand until distractions dominate. Discipline strengthens when a person replaces negotiation with clear boundaries. Certain hours become protected for meaningful work. Certain environments become dedicated to focus. By separating spaces for effort and relaxation, the brain learns contextual behavior. Entering a workspace triggers concentration. Leaving it signals rest. This environmental clarity reduces decision fatigue and preserves mental energy. Patience also becomes stronger through disciplined living. Modern culture encourages rapid results, making slow progress feel inadequate. But meaningful growth rarely follows dramatic timelines. Skill development, financial stability, physical fitness, and intellectual mastery emerge through gradual accumulation. Discipline aligns expectations with reality. Instead of seeking immediate transformation, a disciplined person respects steady improvement. This mindset prevents discouragement and sustains effort through periods when visible progress appears minimal. Patience turns consistency into a quiet advantage. There is also power in reducing emotional dependence on outcomes. When results become the sole source of satisfaction, effort turns fragile. Success creates temporary highs while setbacks create deep frustration. Discipline shifts satisfaction toward process. Completing planned actions becomes fulfilling regardless of immediate results. This internal reward system creates emotional balance. Wins feel meaningful, but they are not required for motivation. Losses feel disappointing, but they do not derail consistency. Emotional stability strengthens because effort remains steady across changing circumstances. Discipline further deepens when a person learns to face reality without avoidance. Procrastination often acts as emotional escape from tasks that feel overwhelming or uncertain. But avoidance increases anxiety because unresolved responsibilities remain present in the background. Facing tasks directly, even imperfectly, reduces their psychological weight. Action replaces rumination. Progress replaces worry. Discipline builds courage not through dramatic gestures but through repeated willingness to engage with what is necessary. Over time, disciplined action begins shaping identity in profound ways. A person starts seeing themselves as someone who handles responsibilities, maintains standards, and honors commitments. This self-image influences future behavior automatically. Choices align with identity because acting otherwise feels inconsistent with personal standards. Discipline then becomes less about effort and more about integrity. Actions reflect character rather than temporary motivation. This identity-driven discipline also strengthens long-term vision. When daily actions align with meaningful priorities, life gains direction. Short-term discomfort feels purposeful rather than random. Effort connects to a broader narrative of growth and contribution. Discipline transforms from mechanical repetition into intentional living. A person no longer feels trapped by routines because routines serve chosen values. As this way of living matures, emotional impulses lose much of their control. Temporary moods no longer dictate long-term decisions. A bad day does not justify abandoning standards. A good day does not create overconfidence. Stability replaces emotional extremes. Discipline becomes a steady undercurrent guiding behavior regardless of circumstances. Eventually, a person realizes that discipline is not something they force themselves to practice. It becomes a natural expression of self-respect, clarity, and responsibility. Life feels less chaotic because actions align with intentions. Progress feels predictable because effort remains consistent. Confidence grows quietly because self-trust has been earned through repeated follow-through. And once discipline reaches this level of integration, a deeper realization begins to surface. Maintaining consistency is no longer the greatest challenge. The real question becomes how to sustain discipline gracefully through life's inevitable disruptions, emotional transitions, and changing ambitions. Understanding this requires exploring the delicate balance between control and flexibility, structure and adaptability, effort and renewal. A balance that determines whether discipline remains rigid and fragile or becomes fluid and lifelong. Life rarely moves in straight lines. Even the most, where discipline feels strong and stable, only to watch it weaken when circumstances change. This leads to a common misunderstanding that discipline must be rigid to be effective. In reality, rigid discipline often breaks under pressure, while flexible discipline adapts and survives. The difference lies in understanding that consistency does not require perfection, it requires resilience. Resilient discipline accepts that energy, focus, and emotional capacity fluctuate. Some days allow deep concentration and intense effort, while others only permit small progress. Instead of demanding identical performance daily, sustainable discipline adjusts expectations while preserving continuity. A person may shorten a workout but still move their body. They may reduce workload but still complete essential tasks. They may simplify routines during stressful periods while maintaining core habits. This adaptability prevents the all or nothing mindset that causes many people to abandon progress entirely after temporary setbacks. Perfectionism quietly sabotages long-term discipline by creating unrealistic standards. When individuals believe routines must be followed flawlessly, minor disruptions feel like total failure. Missing one day becomes an excuse to miss many. This pattern emerges because perfection ties success to ideal conditions, which rarely exist in real life. Flexible discipline separates consistency from perfection. It recognizes that progress includes imperfect days, slower periods, and occasional mistakes. What matters is returning to alignment without unnecessary delay. This gentle recovery strengthens habits more effectively than harsh self-criticism. Emotional transitions also test discipline in subtle ways. Periods of stress, disappointment, or uncertainty can drain motivation and distort priorities. During such times, the mind seeks comfort and relief rather than structured effort. Rigid discipline fights these emotions aggressively, often creating internal conflict and exhaustion. Flexible discipline, however, acknowledges emotional weight without surrendering structure completely. It allows space for recovery while preserving foundational habits. A person might shift from intense productivity to essential maintenance, protecting their stability until emotional balance returns. There is also wisdom in recognizing seasonal rhythms in life. Energy and focus naturally shift across months and years depending on personal responsibilities, health, career demands, and relationships. Expecting identical output during every phase creates frustration. Discipline becomes sustainable when routines evolve alongside life circumstances. A demanding work period may require simplified personal goals. A quieter phase may allow deeper learning and skill development. Discipline remains intact not because routines stay identical, but because commitment to intentional living continues despite changing conditions. Rest plays a crucial role in this balance. Many people treat rest as a reward earned only after exhaustion, but this mindset weakens discipline over time. When recovery is delayed too long, mental resistance increases and focus declines. Planned rest, on the other hand, protects performance. It restores cognitive clarity, emotional stability, and physical energy. Discipline thrives when rest is integrated rather than postponed. This approach prevents burnout and allows effort to remain steady across longer periods. Another important aspect of sustainable discipline is knowing when to release goals that no longer align with personal values. People grow, priorities shift, and ambitions evolve. Holding on to outdated commitments out of stubbornness can create unnecessary strain. Flexible discipline includes periodic reflection, ensuring that daily efforts still serve meaningful directions. Letting go of irrelevant goals does not weaken discipline, it refines it. Energy becomes concentrated on pursuits that genuinely matter, strengthening motivation and reducing internal conflict. The relationship between control and surrender also shapes long-term consistency. Discipline requires controlling actions, but not all outcomes can be controlled. External factors, unexpected obstacles, and uncertainty remain part of life. Trying to control everything creates anxiety and mental fatigue. Sustainable discipline focuses on controllable behaviors while accepting uncertain results. A person commits to preparation, effort, and learning while releasing obsessive attachment to outcomes. This balance protects emotional stability and prevents discouragement when results take time. Self-awareness deepens discipline by helping individuals recognize personal limits and patterns. Some people focus best in the morning, while others perform constant resistance. Discipline becomes smoother when actions flow with personal rhythms instead of fighting them. There is also quiet strength in forgiving temporary regressions. Life events such as illness, travel, family responsibilities, or emotional strain can interrupt established habits. Viewing these interruptions as permanent failures damages self-trust. Instead, seeing them as natural pauses allows smoother recovery. Discipline is not measured by uninterrupted streaks but by the willingness to return repeatedly. Each return reinforces identity and commitment. Over time, flexible discipline creates a calmer relationship with productivity. Effort feels intentional rather than forced. Adjustments happen without guilt. Routines support well-being rather than compete with it. A person becomes firm in priorities but gentle in execution. This balance prevents extremes of overexertion and neglect. Eventually, discipline evolves into a quiet lifestyle philosophy rather than a rigid performance strategy. It becomes a way of respecting time, energy, and personal values. Structure exists, but it breathes. Effort remains steady, but it adapts. Progress continues, but it does not demand perfection. From this perspective, discipline is no longer dependent on motivation, mood, or ideal conditions. It becomes an internal compass guiding behavior through changing environments. The mind grows comfortable with steady effort and patient progress. Emotional waves still rise and fall, but they no longer dictate direction. And as this balanced form of discipline settles into daily life, a deeper awareness begins to emerge. True consistency is not about controlling every moment, but about designing a life where meaningful action feels natural, sustainable, and aligned with who you are becoming. That realization opens the door to mastering the final layer of disciplined living, creating an environment, mindset, and identity so aligned that consistency no longer feels like effort, but simply the way you live. There comes a point where discipline stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like something you are. In the beginning, every effort feels deliberate. You remind yourself to stay focused, you push against distractions, and you consciously choose long-term benefits over immediate comfort. This stage requires awareness and intention because old habits still pull strongly. But as disciplined actions repeat over months and years, something subtle begins to shift. The effort that once felt heavy becomes lighter. Decisions that once required mental negotiation become automatic. The mind no longer treats discipline as an obligation but as a natural standard. This transformation marks the moment when consistency becomes part of identity. Identity-driven discipline is powerful because it removes the need for constant self-persuasion. When a person sees themselves as reliable, focused, and intentional, their behavior begins to align with that image effortlessly. Actions no longer feel forced because they reflect self-perception. A person who identifies as someone who respects time naturally avoids unnecessary delays. Someone who sees themselves as health-conscious moves regularly without needing external pressure. Behavior flows from identity rather than temporary motivation. This alignment reduces inner conflict and preserves mental energy. Environment plays a quiet but decisive role in strengthening this identity. Surroundings constantly influence behavior through subtle cues. A cluttered space invites distraction, while an organized environment signals readiness and clarity. Devices filled with interruptions weaken focus, while structured digital boundaries protect attention. Even small visual reminders can reinforce personal standards. When the environment reflects disciplined values, desired behaviors feel easier and more natural. Instead of relying on willpower to resist chaos, a person lives in spaces that quietly support intentional action. Daily rituals further anchor discipline into identity. These rituals are not dramatic performances of productivity but simple, repeatable actions that signal stability. A consistent morning routine sets the tone for focused effort. A defined start to work reduces procrastination. A closing ritual at night creates mental closure and prepares the mind for recovery. These repeated patterns train the brain to move smoothly between effort and rest. Discipline then feels less like constant control and more like following a familiar rhythm. Clarity of purpose also strengthens long-term consistency. Without meaningful direction, discipline can feel mechanical and uninspiring. But when daily actions connect to personal values, effort gains emotional depth. A person working from routine maintenance into intentional growth. Actions feel connected to something larger than immediate results. Another important shift occurs when individuals stop seeking external validation for disciplined behavior. Praise, recognition, and comparison can provide temporary encouragement, but they create emotional dependence. When discipline relies on outside approval, consistency weakens during periods of invisibility or criticism. Internal validation, however, creates stability. Completing meaningful tasks generates personal satisfaction regardless of external response. This inward focus protects discipline from social fluctuations and builds quiet confidence. Discipline also deepens when a person becomes comfortable working without immediate rewards. Many valuable efforts produce delayed outcomes. Investments grow slowly. Skills develop gradually. Health improves through steady care. When individuals accept that meaningful results take time, impatience loses its control. They focus on daily execution rather than constant evaluation. This patience protects emotional balance and sustains effort through long phases where progress feels invisible. The relationship between discipline and self-respect becomes clearer over time. Each kept commitment reinforces a sense of personal integrity. Actions reflect values, and values guide behavior. This alignment creates inner stability because choices no longer contradict beliefs. A person who values growth continues learning even without pressure. Someone who values responsibility fulfills obligations without reminders. Discipline then becomes an expression of character rather than a reaction to circumstances. There is also a quiet maturity in knowing when effort is sufficient. Overexertion often comes from insecurity or comparison. People push beyond healthy limits trying to prove worth or chase unrealistic standards. Sustainable discipline respects limits while maintaining commitment. Effort remains steady without becoming obsessive. This balance protects mental and physical well-being, allowing consistency to continue across years rather than collapsing from exhaustion. As disciplined living stabilizes, emotional reactions become less extreme. Success brings satisfaction but not arrogance. Failure brings reflection but not despair. This emotional moderation emerges because identity no longer depends entirely on outcomes. A person trusts their process and remains grounded during fluctuations. Stability replaces emotional volatility, allowing clearer thinking and better decision-making. Over time, disciplined individuals develop stronger awareness of how small choices shape long-term direction. They recognize that daily actions quietly accumulate into significant outcomes. This awareness sharpens attention toward seemingly minor decisions. Wasted hours, neglected habits, and postponed responsibilities are no longer dismissed as harmless. Each moment becomes an opportunity to reinforce desired identity. Discipline grows through these small, consistent alignments rather than occasional dramatic efforts. Eventually, life begins to feel more intentional. Time is used with care. Energy is directed thoughtfully. Commitments reflect genuine priorities. Discipline no longer feels restrictive because it serves chosen values. A person experiences greater freedom not from avoiding responsibility but from fulfilling it with clarity and purpose. At this stage, motivation becomes largely irrelevant. Emotional states continue to fluctuate, but they no longer control behavior. Action stems from identity, environment, structure, and purpose. Discipline operates quietly in the background, guiding decisions without constant attention. Consistency becomes a natural expression of how a person lives rather than a daily struggle. And when discipline reaches this level of integration, a final realization emerges: the goal was never to force productivity or suppress emotion. The real achievement was building a life where actions align naturally with values, where effort feels meaningful, and where consistency becomes a calm, steady companion rather than a constant challenge. From here, growth continues not through pressure, but through quiet refinement, thoughtful adjustments, and lifelong commitment to intentional living. What truly separates disciplined people from everyone else is not that they suffer less resistance, but that they understand resistance differently. For most individuals, resistance feels like a warning sign, a signal to stop, delay, or escape. It appears as mental friction, heaviness before starting, or a restless desire to do something easier. This sensation is so uncomfortable that people instinctively interpret it as proof that they are not ready. But once resistance is seen as a normal companion of meaningful effort rather than an enemy, it loses much of its power. This shift changes how tasks are approached. Instead of waiting for a clear, motivated mental state, disciplined individuals begin while feeling uncertain, distracted, or even reluctant. They understand that clarity often arrives after starting, not before. The mind resists beginnings because beginnings require change, and change demands energy. Yet once movement starts, momentum reduces psychological weight. What initially felt overwhelming becomes manageable simply because action has replaced anticipation. This is why starting small remains one of the most reliable tools of discipline. Small beginnings trick the mind into participation without triggering strong resistance. There is also a deeper neurological pattern at play. The brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid uncertainty. New or demanding tasks trigger mild stress responses because they require focus and adaptation. Easy pleasures, on the other hand, offer predictable rewards with minimal effort. Over time, repeated exposure to instant gratification trains the brain to prefer low-effort stimulation. Discipline reverses this conditioning by teaching the brain that effort itself can become familiar and safe. When challenging actions are repeated consistently, they stop feeling threatening. Effort becomes normalized. The brain begins to associate structured work with stability rather than stress. This is why disciplined living often feels uncomfortable at first but peaceful later. In early stages, the mind constantly seeks escape routes. Distractions appear more attractive, and effort feels heavier than it actually is. But repeated follow-through gradually rewires emotional responses. The discomfort shrinks, hesitation decreases, and focused work begins to feel natural. What once required conscious control transforms into automatic behavior. The person no longer fights themselves every day because the internal conflict has been reduced through repetition. Another overlooked element of discipline is emotional neutrality. Many people attach strong emotional judgments to their performance. Productive days are labeled as personal victories, while unproductive days become sources of guilt and self-criticism. This emotional intensity creates instability because motivation rises and falls with performance. Disciplined individuals develop a calmer relationship with effort. They view actions as responsibilities rather than emotional events. Work completed is simply part of the day's structure, not a dramatic achievement. Work postponed is a signal for adjustment, not self-punishment. This neutrality prevents emotional exhaustion and allows consistency to continue without mental strain. Discipline also strengthens when people reduce unnecessary decision-making. Each decision consumes mental energy, and a day filled with trivial choices leaves little focus for meaningful work. Simplifying daily routines preserves cognitive resources. Wearing simple clothing choices, eating similar meals, scheduling fixed work periods, and organizing environments in predictable ways reduce mental clutter. These small simplifications create space for deeper concentration. Discipline becomes easier when energy is directed toward execution rather than constant evaluation. There is also quiet power in respecting personal limits without surrendering to them. Discipline does not demand ignoring exhaustion or emotional strain. Instead, it encourages intelligent adjustment. A person who feels mentally drained may switch to lighter but still productive tasks. Someone facing emotional stress may maintain essential habits while postponing less urgent goals. This balanced approach prevents complete disengagement while allowing recovery. Discipline survives because effort adapts instead of collapsing. Over time, individuals begin noticing a strengthening sense of internal stability. They become less reactive to sudden emotional changes. Urges to procrastinate lose intensity. Impulsive distractions become easier to dismiss. This does not happen because temptations disappear, but because attention grows stronger than impulse. The mind develops a longer attention span and greater tolerance for delayed rewards. Patience increases naturally as consistent effort becomes familiar. Discipline also reshapes how time is perceived. Instead of seeing time as something to spend, disciplined individuals view it as something to invest. Moments gain value because they contribute to long-term direction. This awareness reduces careless time loss. Activities are chosen more intentionally. Leisure remains important, but it becomes restorative rather than escapist. Rest supports future effort instead of strengthens self-belief. Confidence no longer depends on motivational speeches or temporary inspiration. It emerges from lived experience. A person trusts themselves because they have repeatedly demonstrated consistency. This grounded confidence remains stable even during setbacks. Discipline also creates emotional independence. People become less reliant on external pressure, supervision, or deadlines to act responsibly. They develop internal standards that guide behavior even when no one is watching. This independence strengthens integrity and personal accountability. Actions align with values not for recognition, but because consistency feels natural. Eventually, disciplined living produces a quiet sense of control over life's direction. While external events remain unpredictable, daily responses become intentional. This balance between external uncertainty and internal stability reduces anxiety. A person cannot control everything, but they can control their preparation, effort, and decisions. This realization brings calm confidence. At its highest level, discipline transforms from a productivity tool into a philosophy of self-leadership. A person becomes both the planner and the executor of their life. Intentions are translated into action reliably. Goals are pursued with patience. Setbacks are handled with maturity. Emotional waves no longer dictate behavior. Life begins to move with steady purpose rather than reactive motion. And with this realization comes a final, quiet understanding. Discipline was never about forcing yourself to work harder than everyone else. It was about building a stable inner foundation where meaningful action becomes automatic, where distractions lose authority, and where consistency flows naturally from identity and values. From this foundation, growth no longer depends on motivation. It continues steadily, guided by clarity, strengthened by patience, and sustained by the quiet confidence that you can rely on yourself no matter how you feel. If you observe closely, you'll notice that the real power of discipline is not visible in dramatic moments of achievement, but in the quiet, ordinary hours that most people overlook. It lives in the decision to begin working when no one is watching, in choosing preparation over impulse, and in continuing steady effort long after excitement fades. These moments seem small and unremarkable, yet they quietly determine the direction of a person's life. Discipline does not usually announce itself with intensity. Instead, it operates like a calm current beneath daily actions, gently but consistently guiding behavior toward meaningful outcomes. As this steady pattern continues, a person begins to experience a deeper sense of alignment between intention and action. Many individuals live with a subtle internal tension because their daily behavior does not match their long-term aspirations. They plan ambitious goals but repeatedly delay the work required to reach them. This gap creates frustration and self-doubt. Discipline gradually closes this gap. Actions begin reflecting priorities. Time is used in ways that support personal values. This alignment produces a quiet sense of integrity, where life feels coherent rather than conflicted. With alignment comes a reduction in mental noise. Undisciplined routines often create a background hum of unfinished tasks and postponed responsibilities. Even during rest, the mind remains partially preoccupied with what has been avoided. Discipline reduces this psychological weight by addressing responsibilities directly. Important matters are handled in their proper time. The mind relaxes because it no longer needs to repeatedly signal neglected duties. Rest becomes more refreshing, and work becomes more focused because each has its designated place. Another subtle benefit emerges in how disciplined individuals experience decision-making. When priorities are clear and routines are established, many choices become automatic. This reduces hesitation and conserves mental energy. A person no longer debates whether to exercise, study, or complete essential tasks. These actions become standard parts of the day. Decision fatigue decreases, leaving more attention available for complex thinking and creative problem solving. Discipline simplifies life by removing unnecessary internal negotiations. As consistency strengthens, emotional resilience deepens as well. Setbacks, delays, and unexpected obstacles no longer feel catastrophic. A disciplined mind understands that progress is rarely linear. Temporary disruptions are seen as part of the process rather than evidence of failure. This perspective reduces emotional extremes and supports steady recovery. With this shift, time begins to feel different. Moments no longer slip away unnoticed because attention has been trained to value them. You become more aware of how small choices quietly shape long-term outcomes. A single focused hour gains importance. A short period of preparation prevents future stress. Simple daily habits compound into noticeable progress. Discipline sharpens awareness of cause and effect, making life feel more intentional and less accidental. There is also a deepening sense of emotional balance. When discipline guides behavior, emotional highs and lows lose some of their influence. Excitement no longer leads to overcommitment, and discouragement no longer leads to withdrawal. A steady middle ground develops where actions remain consistent regardless of mood. This emotional moderation protects mental energy and allows clearer thinking. Decisions become less reactive and more thoughtful. Relationships can also benefit from disciplined living. When a person manages time and responsibilities reliably, they create space for presence and attention. Conversations are less rushed. Commitments are honored more consistently. Trust strengthens because others learn they can depend on you. Discipline, in this sense, becomes a form of respect not only toward yourself but toward people who share your life. Another subtle transformation occurs in how challenges are perceived. Problems no longer trigger immediate overwhelm because disciplined habits provide stability. A structured routine offers a sense of control even when external situations feel uncertain. You know how to begin addressing difficulties because you are accustomed to consistent action. Discipline builds practical confidence, not the loud confidence of bold claims, but the quiet confidence of proven reliability. As discipline matures, the need for external motivation fades almost completely. You no longer wait for the perfect mood, inspiring message, or urgent deadline. Action begins because it is time to act. This simplicity removes much of the mental drama that prevents progress. Work is done without excessive anticipation or emotional negotiation. Rest is taken without guilt because it is part of a balanced rhythm. Life flows with greater ease because internal resistance has softened. There is also greater acceptance of gradual progress. You understand that meaningful change rarely appears suddenly. Improvements unfold through repeated small efforts that may seem insignificant in isolation. Discipline teaches you to respect these small efforts. Each focused session, each completed responsibility, and each maintained habit contributes quietly to a larger pattern of growth. This perspective reduces impatience and strengthens perseverance. Self-image continues to evolve as well. You begin to see yourself as someone who handles life with steadiness. This identity reinforces consistent behavior without requiring constant reminders. Discipline becomes less about what you must do and more about who you are. Actions reflect character rather than obligation. This alignment reduces inner conflict and strengthens personal integrity. Importantly, disciplined living does not eliminate enjoyment. Instead, it enhances it. Leisure becomes more satisfying when responsibilities have been handled. Rest feels deeper when it follows meaningful effort. Simple pleasures become more vivid because the mind is less cluttered by avoidance and guilt. Discipline creates contrast that makes relaxation truly restorative rather than merely distracting. Over time, fear of difficulty also weakens. You become familiar with effort and no longer interpret it as a threat. Challenging tasks feel manageable because you have practiced steady engagement. This reduces procrastination and builds resilience. Discipline trains the mind to remain present during discomfort instead of escaping it. Eventually, life feels guided rather than scattered. Your days reflect thoughtful choices rather than random impulses. Progress feels steady even when it is slow. You trust your ability to continue because past consistency has proven your reliability. This trust reduces anxiety about the future and regret about the past. Attention settles more fully in the present moment. At its deepest level, discipline becomes an act of self-leadership. You are no longer controlled by shifting moods, external pressures, or momentary desires. Instead, you act according to considered priorities and long-term values. This creates a sense of quiet authority over your own direction. You become both guide and companion to your future self, making decisions today that support tomorrow's well-being. And in this state of self-leadership, a final realization settles gently into awareness. discipline was never about consistent action, protecting your time and energy, and choosing meaningful effort over fleeting comfort. When discipline reaches this level of understanding, motivation becomes optional. Consistency continues naturally, guided by values, strengthened by patience, and sustained by the calm confidence that you are capable of directing your life with intention. In the end, the journey toward discipline reveals something far more meaningful than simple productivity. It reveals a different way of relating to yourself and to life. Most people spend years fighting their own moods, waiting for inspiration, or blaming themselves for inconsistency. This constant inner conflict drains energy and creates quiet frustration. Discipline, when understood deeply, removes this struggle. It replaces emotional bargaining with clear agreements. You decide what matters, you create structures that support it, and you follow through whether the day feels easy or heavy. This simplicity brings a kind of inner peace that motivation alone can never provide. A disciplined life feels calmer because fewer decisions are driven by impulse. Instead of reacting to every distraction, craving, or emotional shift, you move according to chosen priorities. This reduces mental noise. The mind no longer jumps constantly between intention and avoidance. There is less guilt, less rushing, and less last-minute stress. Responsibilities are handled in their proper time, leaving space for genuine rest. Life begins to feel organized not only externally, but internally as well. This internal order strengthens your relationship with time. Time stops feeling like something that slips away and starts feeling like something you use deliberately. You become more aware that each hour carries potential. Wasted time becomes more noticeable, not as a source of self-criticism, but as a reminder to live intentionally. Discipline sharpens this awareness gently. You do not feel pressured to fill every moment with work, but you become less willing to let important moments dissolve in mindless distraction. As your use of time becomes more intentional, your confidence grows naturally. This confidence is different from loud ambition or temporary enthusiasm. It is quieter and more stable. It comes from repeated evidence that you can rely on yourself. When challenges appear, you do not immediately doubt your ability to handle them. You trust your routines, your preparation, and your consistency. Even if outcomes remain uncertain, your effort remains steady. This grounded confidence allows you to approach life with greater calm. Discipline also changes how you experience setbacks. Failure loses its dramatic weight because it is seen as information rather than identity. A mistake becomes a point of adjustment, not a verdict on personal worth. This perspective reduces fear of trying. You become more willing to take thoughtful risks because you trust yourself to recover and adapt. Discipline creates emotional durability, allowing you to continue moving forward without being paralyzed by imperfection. There is also a deeper sense of personal responsibility that emerges. You stop waiting for perfect conditions, external pressure, or sudden inspiration. You understand that meaningful progress depends on daily choices, not rare moments of motivation. This awareness brings maturity. You accept that some days will feel uninspiring, yet you continue showing up. Responsibility stops feeling heavy because it becomes part of self-respect. You act not because you are forced to, but because it aligns with the person you have chosen to become. As discipline strengthens, comparisons with others begin to fade. You become less concerned with how quickly someone else is progressing and more focused on maintaining your own consistency. This shift protects mental energy. Instead of chasing external validation, you measure progress through personal alignment and steady improvement. Satisfaction comes from honoring your commitments rather than outperforming others. This inward focus deepens your sense of independence. You are less influenced by social pressure, trends, or the opinions of others. Your direction becomes guided by values rather than noise. Discipline acts as a stabilizing force, helping you remain grounded even in distracting environments. You become more selective about where your attention goes and more protective of your mental space. Gratitude also grows more naturally within disciplined living. When life is approached with intention, small achievements become more visible. Completing daily responsibilities brings quiet satisfaction. Progress, even when gradual, feels meaningful. You begin noticing how consistent effort shapes opportunities and strengthens abilities. This awareness nurtures appreciation, but without restless urgency. Goals remain important, yet they no longer dominate your emotional state. You learn to value the process of becoming rather than obsessing over distant outcomes. This balance prevents burnout and keeps effort sustainable across years. There is also an increasing sense of harmony between mind and action. Internal intentions match external behavior more closely. This alignment reduces inner tension and builds integrity. You feel more authentic because your actions reflect your values. Discipline strengthens this authenticity by ensuring that decisions are guided by conscious priorities rather than passing impulses. Eventually, a disciplined life feels steady and purposeful. You are not constantly chasing motivation or fighting distraction. Instead, you operate through thoughtful systems that support meaningful goals. Effort becomes a natural part of daily rhythm. Rest becomes restorative rather than avoidant. Progress becomes predictable because consistency replaces emotional volatility. At this stage, discipline reveals its deepest gift, self-trust. You no longer question whether you will follow through on important commitments. You know, through lived experience, that you will act with intention even when conditions are imperfect. This trust creates a strong inner foundation that supports every future ambition. And with that foundation in place, life opens in a different way. Goals feel achievable. Challenges feel manageable. Time feels valuable. You move forward not with pressure, but with quiet determination. Discipline becomes less about control and more about alignment, aligning actions with values, effort with purpose, and daily behavior with long-term vision. In this alignment, motivation becomes a welcome guest but no longer a requirement. You continue progressing steadily, guided by clarity, supported by structure, and strengthened by the calm confidence that you can rely on yourself in every season of life. When discipline becomes a natural part of life, something subtle yet powerful begins to change in how you experience your own existence. The constant rush fades. The inner arguments grow quieter. You no longer feel like you are dragging yourself through responsibilities or negotiating with every task. Instead, there is a steady rhythm guiding your days. You know when to work, when to pause, and when to rest. This rhythm does not feel restrictive, it feels supportive, like a structure quietly holding your life together. One of the greatest gifts of this steady discipline is mental clarity. When actions are aligned with priorities, the mind carries fewer unresolved tensions. You are not constantly reminded of tasks you keep postponing. There is less background guilt draining your attention. Your thoughts feel lighter because your responsibilities are handled in their time. This clarity allows deeper focus, more thoughtful decisions, and a calmer emotional state. You also begin to notice a stronger connection between effort and meaning. Work no longer feels like something separate from life, it becomes an expression of who you are and what you value. Simple daily actions, preparing well, showing up on time, maintaining commitments, begin to reflect personal standards. Discipline turns ordinary routines into meaningful expressions of character. Even small tasks carry quiet significance because they reinforce integrity. This integrity strengthens how you see yourself. Instead of defining your identity by temporary emotions or public recognition, you begin to define it through consistent behavior. You trust your actions more than your moods. This creates a stable self-image that does not fluctuate wildly with success or failure. Confidence becomes quieter but more durable, built on repeated evidence rather than hopeful thinking. Another transformation occurs in your relationship with uncertainty. Life will always include unpredictable events, shifting circumstances, and unexpected challenges. Discipline does not remove uncertainty, but it prepares you to face it with steadiness. Because you are accustomed to consistent effort and thoughtful planning, you respond to disruptions with greater composure. You adjust routines without losing direction. You recover from setbacks without losing confidence. Discipline becomes a stabilizing anchor in changing conditions. There is also a noticeable reduction in procrastination-driven stress. Much of the anxiety people experience comes not from difficulty itself but from delaying necessary action. Unfinished responsibilities quietly accumulate mental pressure. Discipline breaks this cycle by encouraging timely engagement. Tasks are approached directly instead of avoided repeatedly. This reduces the emotional weight of anticipation and replaces control preparation, focus, and persistence. This distinction brings peace. You stop exhausting yourself trying to manage uncontrollable results and instead invest energy where it truly matters, in your own actions. Discipline teaches acceptance of outcomes while maintaining ownership of effort. Over time, patience becomes a natural companion. You grow comfortable with gradual progress because you understand that meaningful achievements require steady investment. You no longer crave immediate transformation or dramatic breakthroughs. Small improvements feel valuable because they represent forward movement. Discipline shifts your attention from quick wins to lasting growth. This long-term perspective also softens emotional extremes. Success brings satisfaction without arrogance, and failure brings reflection without despair. Because your identity rests on consistent effort rather than fluctuating results, emotional reactions remain balanced. You maintain momentum regardless of temporary highs or lows. Relationships often improve under disciplined living as well. Reliability builds trust. Managing time responsibly allows greater presence with others. You listen more attentively because your mind is less cluttered with unfinished obligations. Keeping promises becomes natural, strengthening bonds through dependability. Discipline quietly supports not only personal growth but also social harmony. There is also an increased appreciation for simplicity. You become less attracted to chaotic busyness and more drawn to purposeful action. Clear priorities replace scattered efforts. You value depth over constant stimulation. This simplicity reduces overwhelm and strengthens focus, making daily life feel more manageable and intentional. Eventually, discipline evolves beyond routines and enters the realm of personal philosophy. It shapes how you think, choose, and respond. You develop a habit of acting with intention rather than impulse. You pause before reacting emotionally. You consider long-term consequences more naturally. Discipline becomes an internal compass guiding behavior across situations. At its core, this way of living nurtures self-respect. You honor your time, your commitments, and your potential. You no longer treat your goals casually or your responsibilities lightly. Discipline becomes an expression of valuing your own life enough to live it deliberately. This self-respect radiates quiet confidence that influences every area of experience. And as this disciplined philosophy settles deeply into daily life, one final understanding becomes clear. Motivation was never meant to carry the weight of your ambitions. Feelings are temporary and unpredictable, but values and intentions can remain steady. Discipline bridges the gap between who you are today and who you are becoming. It transforms scattered effort into meaningful progress and replaces inner conflict with quiet alignment. From this point forward, life feels less like a series of emotional reactions and more like a consciously directed journey. You move steadily, guided by purpose rather than mood. You rest without guilt, work without drama, and grow without constant self-doubt. Discipline becomes a lifelong companion, calm, reliable, and quietly powerful, supporting you as you continue building a life defined not by fleeting motivation, but by consistent, intentional action. There is a gentle strength that emerges when discipline matures beyond effort and turns into quiet self-mastery. At this stage, you no longer experience discipline as pressure coming from outside or force applied from within. It feels natural, like breathing with awareness. You act not because you are chasing perfection, and not because you fear failure, but because consistent action has become your normal way of living. This calm reliability creates a deep sense of stability that influences every part of life. You begin to notice that your days carry less emotional turbulence. Urgent impulses lose their intensity because you are no longer controlled by momentary desires. Instead of reacting immediately to discomfort, boredom, or distraction, you pause. That pause becomes powerful. It gives you space to choose rather than obey impulses. In that small space between feeling and action, discipline quietly operates. You respond with intention rather than habit, and that changes the direction of your decisions in subtle but meaningful ways. As this self-mastery strengthens, you develop a healthier relationship with discomfort. You no longer see difficulty as something unfair or threatening. Effort becomes a familiar companion on the path of growth. Just as physical muscles strengthen through resistance, your mental resilience grows through steady challenges. Because you face purpose, your days feel connected to larger intentions rather than filled with random activity. Even ordinary tasks gain meaning because they contribute to long-term vision. Discipline turns routine into quiet progress and effort into meaningful contribution. In this final understanding, discipline reveals its true nature. It is not harshness, restriction, or endless self-control. It is a gentle but firm guidance system that keeps your actions aligned with what matters most. It protects your attention from being scattered, your energy from being wasted, and your time from being lost. Motivation may still visit occasionally, bringing bursts of enthusiasm and inspiration, but you no longer depend on it. Your life continues moving forward through steady commitment and thoughtful action. Discipline becomes the quiet foundation supporting growth in every season. And with that foundation firmly in place, you step into a way of living defined not by emotional extremes or temporary drives, but by calm consistency, clear intention, and deep trust in your ability to guide your own path. A life where progress feels natural, effort feels meaningful, and each day becomes a deliberate step toward the person you are continuously becoming. There is a quiet moment in personal growth when you stop trying to become a different person and begin learning how to guide the person you already are. Discipline reaches its most refined form here. It is no longer a tool for dramatic self-reinvention or extreme productivity. Instead, it becomes a steady hand that gently directs your natural tendencies toward meaningful outcomes. You begin working with yourself rather than against yourself, and this cooperation creates a deep sense of inner ease. At this stage, you understand that human energy is cyclical. Some days bring sharp focus and strong momentum, while others feel slower and more reflective. Instead of judging these fluctuations harshly, you learn to navigate them intelligently. When energy is high, you engage deeply with demanding work. When energy is low, you shift toward lighter responsibilities without abandoning structure entirely. Discipline becomes less about constant intensity and more about maintaining direction across varying internal states. This approach removes the guilt that once accompanied slower days. You realize that consistency does not require identical performance. What matters is preserving the thread of intentional action. Even small steps maintain continuity. A brief session of focused work, a short walk, or a simple act of preparation keeps the rhythm intact. These modest actions prevent the feeling of falling off track, allowing progress to continue without emotional strain. As discipline becomes more compassionate, your internal dialogue softens. You stop speaking to yourself like a strict critic and begin responding like a steady guide. When mistakes occur, you correct course without harshness. When delays happen, you resume without dramatizing the setback. This balanced self-guidance strengthens resilience because you no longer waste energy on self-blame. Instead, attention returns quickly to purposeful action. You also become more aware of how attention shapes experience. Where attention goes, energy follows. Undisciplined attention scatters across distractions, worries, and comparisons, leaving little focus for meaningful work. Disciplined attention, however, is directed deliberately. You learn to notice when your focus drifts and gently bring it back to the present task. This repeated redirection strengthens concentration like a muscle, allowing you to engage more deeply with what truly matters. Over time, you develop a refined sensitivity to what deserves your energy and what quietly drains it. Certain activities may feel urgent but contribute little to long-term growth. Other efforts may appear small yet hold lasting value. Discipline sharpens this discernment. You become more selective, investing energy where it creates meaningful returns. This thoughtful allocation prevents burnout and enhances effectiveness. Another subtle shift appears in how you approach planning. Instead of overloading schedules with unrealistic expectations, you begin designing days that respect human limits. Plans become more balanced, leaving space for rest and reflection. This realism strengthens follow-through because tasks feel achievable rather than overwhelming. Discipline thrives when structure supports natural capacity instead of ignoring it. This balanced planning also reduces the emotional swings caused by overcommitment. When schedules are too demanding, even minor disruptions create stress. But when plans include flexibility, adjustments feel manageable. Discipline becomes steady rather than fragile. You maintain momentum or fatigue may have previously pushed you toward procrastination. Now, instead of reacting automatically, you observe these states with curiosity. This pause weakens impulsive patterns. You respond more consciously, choosing constructive action even when emotions fluctuate. This emotional awareness strengthens long-term stability. You realize that feelings are temporary visitors, not permanent authorities. Discipline helps you treat emotions as signals to understand, not commands to obey. This distinction allows thoughtful responses instead of reactive behavior. Gratitude begins playing a larger role as well. When progress is measured through consistent effort rather than dramatic milestones, small improvements become more visible. You appreciate the quiet satisfaction of completing responsibilities and maintaining commitments. This appreciation nurtures motivation from within, making discipline feel rewarding rather than restrictive. Your relationship with ambition also evolves into something healthier. Instead of chasing constant achievement to prove worth, you pursue growth as an expression of curiosity and potential. Discipline supports this exploration by providing steady structure. You move forward with patience, allowing development to unfold naturally without forcing unrealistic timelines. There is also a growing comfort with simplicity. You no longer feel compelled to fill every moment with activity or stimulation. Quiet periods become opportunities for reflection and mental renewal. Discipline protects these moments, recognizing their importance for long-term clarity. Life feels less rushed and more deliberate. Eventually, you recognize that discipline is deeply connected to self-honesty. You stop pretending that tomorrow will magically provide better conditions. You acknowledge present responsibilities and address them directly. This honesty removes the illusion of endless postponement and replaces it with grounded action. Through this honest engagement, self-respect deepens. You demonstrate through behavior that your goals and values truly matter. Each consistent action reinforces personal integrity. Discipline becomes a daily affirmation that you take your life seriously. As this self-guided way of living matures, external validation loses much of its influence. You no longer depend heavily on praise, comparison, or recognition. Satisfaction comes from alignment between intention and action. This independence strengthens emotional stability and reduces social pressure. Gradually, life begins to feel cohesive. Your habits support your priorities. Your decisions reflect your values. Your routines protect your time and attention. Discipline weaves these elements together into a unified pattern of intentional living. In this cohesion, inner conflict fades. You spend less energy debating with yourself and more energy acting with clarity. The mind feels lighter because choices are guided by established principles rather than shifting impulses. And within this lighter mental space, a final understanding gently settles. Discipline is not about controlling every detail of life. It is about creating enough inner structure to move with purpose while allowing space for growth and change. It is about guiding your energy wisely, responding thoughtfully, and honoring your commitments with quiet consistency. From here, life unfolds with greater harmony. You act not from pressure but from clarity. You progress not through emotional bursts but through steady intention. Discipline remains a calm presence in the background, supporting your direction without demanding constant attention. It becomes a trusted companion in the ongoing process of becoming, a quiet strength that helps you live deliberately, adapt gracefully, and continue moving forward with patience, resilience, and deep confidence in your ability to guide your own path. There is a refined calmness that settles in when discipline becomes fully integrated into the way you live. You no longer think about it constantly, just as you no longer think about breathing. It happens quietly in the background, guiding your actions without demanding attention. Decisions feel cleaner. Movements feel intentional. Your days unfold with a steady sense of direction rather than emotional randomness. This calm consistency becomes one of the most reliable sources of inner stability. At this point, discipline is no longer driven by fear of failure or pressure to succeed. It is guided by understanding. You recognize that every action carries weight, shaping the person you are gradually becoming. This awareness influences even small decisions. Waking on time, finishing planned work, keeping promises, and maintaining healthy habits no longer feel like obligations. There is less conflict between what you believe is important and how you spend your time. This alignment creates a sense of integrity that feels grounding. You move through responsibilities with greater ease because you are no longer divided internally. Your efforts feel unified, directed toward a life you genuinely want to build. A deeper sense of patience also becomes natural. You stop rushing progress or demanding immediate transformation. Instead, you trust steady effort. You understand that meaningful results grow slowly, shaped by consistent attention. This patience reduces anxiety and allows you to remain focused without emotional exhaustion. Discipline supports long-term vision by helping you stay committed through gradual development. Another quiet transformation occurs in your relationship with setbacks. Difficulties no longer feel like interruptions to your journey, they become part of it. You respond with adjustment rather than frustration. Because discipline has strengthened your resilience, you know how to recover without losing momentum. You bend when necessary, but you do not break. This flexibility keeps progress alive even in uncertain circumstances. You also become more protective of your attention. You realize that attention is one of your most valuable resources, shaping the quality of both work and experience. Discipline teaches you to direct attention deliberately rather than allowing it to scatter across distractions. This focused awareness deepens your engagement with meaningful tasks and improves the quality of your efforts. As attention strengthens, presence deepens. You become more aware of the current moment rather than constantly drifting toward future worries or past regrets. Discipline grounds you in purposeful action, which naturally brings the mind into the present. This presence enhances both productivity and peace of mind. Relationships benefit from this grounded presence as well. You listen more carefully, respond more thoughtfully, and show up more reliably. Discipline strengthens trust because others recognize your consistency. Reliability becomes part of your character, quietly reinforcing meaningful connections. There is also a subtle increase in emotional independence. You become less influenced by praise or criticism because your actions are guided by internal standards rather than external approval. Discipline stabilizes self-worth by rooting it in consistent effort and integrity. This independence protects your motivation from social fluctuations. Gratitude grows naturally in this state of intentional living. You begin noticing the value of steady progress, supportive relationships, and simple daily routines. Discipline slows impulsive living and makes space for appreciation. Small achievements feel meaningful because they reflect sustained commitment. Ambition, too, becomes more balanced. You continue striving for growth, yet without the restlessness that once accompanied it. Discipline channels ambition into steady improvement rather than frantic striving. You pursue goals with calm determination, allowing progress to unfold at a sustainable pace. Over time, this steady approach reshapes your sense of freedom. Freedom no longer means acting on every impulse. It means having the clarity and control to choose what truly matters. Discipline grants this freedom by protecting your time and guiding your energy toward meaningful pursuits. Life begins to feel more deliberate and less accidental. Your days reflect conscious choices rather than reactive patterns. Habits support your direction. Routines reduce chaos. Discipline becomes the quiet architecture shaping a purposeful life. In this stage, motivation becomes almost irrelevant. You no longer depend on emotional surges to act. Your systems, habits, and identity carry you forward reliably. Feelings may influence the tone of your day, but they no longer determine whether important work gets done. A quiet confidence grows from this reliability. You trust yourself not because you feel powerful, but because you have proven consistent. This confidence is calm and grounded, allowing you to face challenges without dramatic emotional swings. Eventually, you see discipline for what it truly is, a form of self-respect expressed through action. It reflects your decision to treat your time, energy, and potential with care. Each discipline choice becomes a small act of honoring the life you are building. This understanding softens the entire experience. Discipline is no longer rigid or demanding. It feels supportive, like a steady guide helping you stay aligned with what matters most. Effort becomes meaningful rather than burdensome. And with this gentle mastery, life flows with quiet purpose. You move steadily, guided by intention rather than a rule you follow, but a way you live, a quiet strength that keeps you aligned, focused, and moving forward with clarity, balance, and deep trust in your ability to shape your own path. There comes a serene point in disciplined living where striving softens into steadiness. The restless urge to constantly push, prove, or outperform begins to fade, replaced by a composed commitment to simply continue. You wake each day without dramatic internal negotiations. You understand your responsibilities, you recognize your priorities, and you begin. This beginning no longer feels heavy because it is no longer debated. It is accepted as a natural part of living with intention. In this calm rhythm, discipline feels less like effort and more like alignment. Your habits match your values. Your time reflects your intentions. You no longer experience the draining gap between what you plan and what you actually do. That gap, which once produced guilt and self-doubt, gradually closes through consistent follow-through. Living becomes simpler because your inner and outer worlds move in the same direction. This alignment creates a sense of quiet satisfaction that does not depend on dramatic milestones. You begin appreciating the simple act of honoring commitments. Completing a planned task, maintaining a healthy routine, or showing up fully for responsibilities brings a steady sense of fulfillment. These small acts reinforce self-trust and deepen confidence in your ability to guide your life responsibly. Your relationship with progress becomes gentler. You no longer measure growth only through large achievements or visible success. Instead, you recognize the value of steady movement. Even on slower days, you appreciate maintaining direction. Discipline teaches you that consistency, not intensity, shapes meaningful change. This perspective reduces pressure and allows growth to unfold naturally. Emotional balance strengthens further. You experience fewer extreme highs driven by sudden motivation and fewer deep lows caused by procrastination or regret. A stable middle ground emerges where you work calmly and rest peacefully. Discipline regulates emotional swings by replacing impulsive action with thoughtful structure. As emotional balance deepens, your responses to challenges become more composed. When unexpected problems arise, you rely on steady habits instead of reacting impulsively. You assess situations with clearer thinking because your mind is not overwhelmed by unfinished tasks or chaotic routines. Discipline provides a stable platform from which to handle uncertainty. You also become more mindful of energy management. Instead of exhausting yourself through irregular bursts of effort, you distribute energy steadily across responsibilities. Rest becomes purposeful rather than escapist. You pause to recover so that future effort remains effective. This sustainable pace protects both productivity and well-being. Attention grows sharper and more deliberate. You become less vulnerable to distractions because your priorities remain clear. Discipline strengthens your ability to stay present with meaningful tasks, allowing deeper focus and higher quality work. Concentration becomes less of a struggle and more of a practiced habit. With sharper attention comes greater awareness of life's details. You notice how small choices shape outcomes. You see the connection between preparation and performance, between patience and progress. Discipline reveals these patterns gradually, helping you make wiser decisions over time. Relationships benefit from this steadiness as well. Because you manage responsibilities reliably, you create space to be fully present with others. Conversations receive genuine attention. Commitments are honored consistently. Discipline strengthens trust by making your actions dependable. A growing sense of independence also emerges. You rely less on external pressure, urgent deadlines, or social comparison to stay productive. Your motivation becomes internal, guided by personal standards rather than outside expectations. Discipline reinforces this autonomy, allowing you to move confidently according to your own values. Gratitude becomes a quiet companion in daily life. You appreciate the stability created by consistent habits and thoughtful routines. You recognize how disciplined choices reduce stress and increase clarity. This awareness nurtures contentment, making everyday progress feel meaningful. Ambition transforms into a steady aspiration rather than an anxious chase. You continue striving to improve, but without harsh self-criticism or frantic urgency. Discipline channels ambition into sustainable growth, allowing you to pursue goals patiently and thoughtfully. As this patient pursuit continues, you begin to value and concentrate on what truly matters. Over time, this focused simplicity fosters inner peace. You no longer feel pulled in multiple directions by conflicting desires. Decisions become clearer because they align with established values. Discipline creates harmony between intention and action. Confidence matures into quiet assurance. You do not feel the need to display achievements or seek constant validation. Your confidence rests on lived experience, on countless moments of choosing responsibility over impulse. Discipline builds this assurance gradually through repeated follow-through. Eventually, you understand that discipline is less about achieving control and more about cultivating harmony. It aligns your actions with your purpose, your habits with your values, and your time with your priorities. Life feels more integrated and less fragmented. In this integration, effort becomes meaningful rather than burdensome. You no longer resist responsibility because you see its role in shaping a fulfilling life. Discipline transforms obligation into intentional practice. And as this understanding deepens, a gentle realization settles within you. A disciplined life is not rigid or joyless, it is balanced and deliberate. It allows space for growth, rest, connection, and reflection. It replaces chaos with clarity and hesitation with steady movement. From here, you continue forward with calm persistence. Motivation may rise and fall, but your direction remains steady. Discipline walks quietly beside you, guiding your choices, protecting your focus, and supporting your progress. It becomes a lifelong companion, subtle yet powerful, helping you live with purpose, act with integrity, and move through each day with balance, resilience, and a deep sense of trust in your own consistent effort.